Welcome. My name is Sean Ulmer. I'm Executive Director at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. I want to thank you for joining me for another in our series of monthly presentations called One Night Stand. And this is where we look at one work by one artist for one night. We're going to do kind of a deep dive. It's a short program by design, maybe 20 or so minutes, with some Q&A at the end. But it's our opportunity to bring something out either that's in storage or highlight something that's on view, and kind of go into a deeper discussion about it than we normally would. And so tonight I've chosen a work that is currently on view for a little while longer. It's a work that was chosen by our new curator, Julia Jessen, for her first show, her inaugural show called Surprise, the new curator's surprise finds in the collection. Julia joined us in July, and one of the first things that she did was to familiarize herself with the collection, see what she has to work with. And as an outgrowth of that, she pulled together this exhibition of things that she found in the collection that were a little bit surprising to her for different reasons. And tonight we're going to focus on a work that is by the artist Chow. And as I said, this is in the exhibition Surprise. And if you are interested in seeing it in person, I want to let you know that Surprise closes on Sunday. So this is your last sort of chance to rush on down to the museum and take a look at this work in person. Hopefully, I can whet your appetite with my presentation this evening. So, and here is a view of the Cedar Rapids log. And this looks like it's just a big old pile of stuff, but it isn't. It's actually, um, it is a wide variety of materials, as you can probably pick out here, and I've got a few more details. But it is all knitted together into one long continuous roll that is then sort of spiraled upon itself to create a kind of log-like form. And here, if you look at it from directly from above, I think that becomes a little bit clearer, where it is kind of like a log, where that concentric series of rings look like the cross section of a log. And the whole idea, the whole concept behind this, or one of the concepts behind the work, is that it's marking the passage of time in the same way that rings in a tree mark the passage of time, that show, each year another ring, and the tree grows ever bigger. And this is it's really sort of the outgrowth of a performance piece in many ways, because this is a piece that the artist Chow, who in a short-term residency here in Cedar Rapids, from where she was living at the time in New York, um, uh, invited the people of Cedar Rapids to bring materials to her, and she would knit them into this long sort of strand, maybe about 4 or 5 inches wide, and this long continuous strand, um, and and um, and talk to the people who were donating these pieces, and pass time with them, talking about her process, talking about her thoughts. You can see here in the center of this image a little snippet of a Cedar Rapids policeman's a badge, a cloth badge that would be on their uniform. So this is actually part of an old Cedar Rapids police department uniform here. You can see cable, like telephone cable and wires. There's straps, there's rope. People were bringing all kinds of craziness to Kat Chow, and she was knitting these into this log that really reflects her time in Cedar Rapids and the people in Cedar Rapids who brought these things to her. You can see there's plastic, there's bubble wrap, just everything. And when someone would bring, say, a T-shirt, she had a way of cutting the T-shirt up so that it became one very long strand that she could then knit with. So that's what you see kind of in this yellow. This is probably a Hawkeye T-shirt of some sort, where she's cut it in a way that it becomes basically one long strand that she then knits into. And remember, we're only seeing the surface of it. This goes down 4 or 5 inches. It has depth to it, and very much marks that passage of time here in Cedar Rapids and her interaction with others in Cedar Rapids. Here, someone brought kind of a spirally piece of wood or vine, which she sort of wrapped and twisted into it. People brought paper. You see a pom pom there. You see other forms of knitting. She really took whatever was brought to her and tried to find a way to incorporate it into this log, into the rings of this log. And here, one more detail. You see there's some styrofoam tubing that she was able to incorporate in, paisley pattern fabric. That could have been a scarf. It might have been a tie. But she there's some caution tape. She took everything that was brought to her and incorporated it in some way in her work. Here you see some straps from like straps that you would use to hold things down. And here is Kat Chow, here working in the Carnegie Library wing of the museum. This is when she is making this, and she's interacting with the people who have stopped by to drop things off to her. And here are some others who are kind of inspecting her work. That gives you a sense of the width of the piece. And so she's just adding all of these elements that people are bringing to her and into this long, basically would kind of be like a really, really long scarf, if you will. And then she rolls it into this spiral that makes it look like a log. And she's talking and interacting with the public while she's doing it. That's very much part of the process. This is sort of an outgrowth of spending time with people, talking about various things, talking about art, talking about her philosophy of art. And this all happened in 2007, I think it is. Yes, the date that we have on the piece. And it is in conjunction with an exhibition. She was here at a residency for an exhibition that she did in 2006. So I think she began it in 2006, but it finished up the log in 2007 because she didn't quite get done with it all in that residency. So I was a new curator here at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art, having come here from the University of Michigan Museum of Art. And and one of the first shows that I convinced the director to do was Kat Chow Material Girl. Now, I had worked with Kat Chow when I was the curator at the Johnson Museum at Cornell University in Ithaca. She was in a group show that I did called Uncommon Threads, where I looked at contemporary artists who were using clothing as a surrogate or a metaphor for the human body. And Kat Chow did a really, really interesting piece there made up of Power Ranger cards. And she made it in a kind of kimono form. And it was about empowering women, especially Japanese women, from the traditional roles that are usually associated with Japanese women and making them into little Power Rangers themselves. So I really loved including that piece in Uncommon Threads. And the thought occurred to me since Kat was really basically a Chicago based artist at the time, that it might be nice to do a solo show of her work, and we called it Material Girl because it really is about the materiality of the pieces that really entrances her. Now, by the time that we were doing the show, of course, she had already relocated then to New York, but most of her collectors and most of the people we borrowed from the show were still in Chicago, and she had gotten her bachelor's degree at Northwestern in Chicago, and it was in fashion design. But her work, while it has a strong fashion feel, is really more about sculpture. And she just uses the fashion sort of as a vehicle. I should say that she was born in New Jersey in 1973. She received her bachelor's degree from Northwestern in 1995, and she got her start in the art world in the later 90s. I had her in my group show in Ithaca in 2001. And then we had her in this show in 2006. And she says in her artist statement, she says, I am a passionate collector of visual elements that I strategically recombine into an aesthetically pleasing object, usually a garment. I transform the function and form of everyday materials until they become nearly unrecognizable, in which the familiar becomes the unexpected. I want the viewer to experience this phenomenon of what happens between the assumption of casualness and the discovery of intensity, which creates an almost mundane surrealism. And then later she writes, my work shares an obsession with repetition, pattern, and accumulation. The pieces are immensely labor intensive and process oriented. Once I decide to use a material, I must find a way to make it my own. In experimenting with it, I cannot somehow build on its inherent qualities, then my work would be without meaning. I ask myself, how can I transform a material without destroying it, and yet find a way to bring it closer to myself? And she does perceive her work, as I said, as sculptures. She did get her degree in theater, I should say, at Northwestern with costume design as her major. And it was in that she learned to do work with chain mail, which is a kind of flexible armor made of linked metal rings that was originally used in the Middle Ages. She became fascinated with that process and began to fabricate garments and other objects out of chain mail. I wanted to walk you through some of the pieces in this exhibition because I think it provides really, really good context for the Cedar Rapids log, which is sort of where does this log fit into Kat Chow's career. So this is called Flapper Dress. It's from 1999, so it was shortly after she got out of school. This is made up of plastic strips and brass jump rings. That's all that this is made out of. So, and she said these are scraps that are punched out of a sheet of plastic and then thrown away as garbage. I like the idea of recycling something that is unwanted and unusable, giving it a new life as something beautiful and desirable. And this is the image in the exhibition, but we also have this really nice detailed shot from a different presentation of the same piece. And here you can see just simple, somewhat translucent plastic strips and nothing but these little O-rings, these little brass jump rings that are holding it together. You can see how she's kind of making a chain mail out of it and connecting these pieces together. So this is kind of as you would first enter into the space, and we dedicated 5 galleries to her work and spread things out and gave it some pretty good room here. One big gallery was full of a lot of these costume or clothing based outfits, and so I have a couple of detailed shots of them and kind of progress around the space from left to right, and share with you some of these others. Here's a view from the opposite end of the same gallery there. You see very, very dramatically lit, perfect sort of theatrical lighting for this work. So here's Down Coat, which is nothing but quilted Kleenex tissues. And she said, this is from 2002. She said, when I started this piece, I was thinking about the concept of being blue or sad. So I decided to construct this coat entirely of Kleenex tissues. The form, a quilted, soft, hooded style with pockets, is comforting, just like the tissues can be when you are sad. It has worn away in certain areas, which I think adds to the metaphor of being vulnerable and having one's exterior environment wearing away at oneself. Really quite beautifully poetic. Here, the AstroTurf dress, as you could probably have figured out yourself, made completely out of AstroTurf. Taking a mundane material and making something completely different out of it. Or here, Measure for Measure. This is based on a typical 1950s house dress. It represents every woman and her struggle to measure up to society's standards. It serves to empower women so that they can come to terms with themselves and their bodies. This is Kat Chow talking. And I have a detail of it. So you can see she's really just stitched together some differently colored measuring tapes after just kind of weaving them into a form. And then it's just kind of a wonderful metaphor using the measuring tape for how people measure up in society. And she even wears it from time to time. So here's a great sort of publicity shot of her wearing that dress, holding a tape measure. Oh, here's Sandpiper Dress from 1999, also a little bit earlier. And this is also called Distressed. And it is pleated sandpaper with leather trim and thread and glue. And then Not for Sale. This is made up of 1,000 $1 bills. So she said, I asked 1,000 people, friends, acquaintances, and total strangers, to donate $1 towards the making of the dress. The list of sponsors is just as important as the dress itself. And so whenever this is exhibited, the list of sponsors is there as well. I could not have done it without the support of these mostly Chicago people. The sponsor list is an interesting travel log of my daily activities. It shows whether or not I was at school, in the gallery district, or just running into a friend on the street. This piece speaks to the commercial aspect of art and fashion and asks the question, who determines the value of art? If you look down the center, front, back, and side seams of the dress, you will see a special detail. So I think I have a detail of it. So when you look down the seams, they actually sort of line up, and you ended up getting sort of more fully a face of George Washington. You can see she cut these all into strips, and then she creates these rings. And you can see each of those rings is stitched, and then she basically works the rings into each other, and she creates this kind of chainmail form for this paper dress. And this work, better seen here, is Diamond Dress. And this is just plastic discs and the brass jump rings again. She loves those brass jump rings. So basically, she has these discs, these round discs with square centers, and then links them together with the jump rings. All right. This one is, let me see here, is called the Mini Blind Tunic. And this is actually from two different periods. This is from very, very early on, and it's from early 90s. She first created the upper part, it's the bodice part of it, and that's pure chainmail made out of these brass jump rings. And then later, she added mini blinds to hang down from them, so that as she wears it and moves around in it, the mini blinds move about and create their own sort of pattern. So it was first the chainmail vest, and then when she added the mini blind, she changed the title to Mini Blind Tunic. And here's a detail of the chainmail. It's a very simple form where these brass rings are just intersecting or interlocked with each other. So as you leave that, you also had some display cases of other chainmail work that she had done, and you enter into the other two galleries, which are much more sculptural in effect. So as she progresses in her career, she becomes a little bit more sculptural in her work. And here you see uh, a form that she becomes very, very fond of, and that is making things with zippers. So we've seen lots of different other material, but she realized that if she took two different zippers and zipped them together, that she would end up with this really interesting kind of pattern. And so she began to experiment and play around with sort of these long runs of zipper material, zipping two different colors together and then creating something out of that. So in this piece, which is an hourglass here, sorry. Let me go back one here. I got ahead of myself. This one's called Consume. It's from 2003. It's basically two single links of zipper that have been threaded together. And so this is the first time that I took a wearable garment, a zipper skirt, and mounted it on the wall for a totally different effect. I like the idea that the viewer does not realize that it's made from zippers or that it's a skirt, but upon closer inspection figures it out. And then this is Hourglass from 2003 also. Is again a single length of zipper. I said this piece was my first non-wearable zipper sculpture and a huge breakthrough in my work at the time. And on the other side of the gallery space, we find things that are more purely sculptural, and I have a few details of that. But I wanted to make sure that we looked also at the zipper dress in the center. This is, again, a single zipper that has been sort of wound and sewn together, and you zip it, the end of the zipper's up in the back near the top. And so basically you zip it down until you can squeeze your body into it, and then it's zipped up around you, and you wear and that's how you wear it. That's the only way that sort of you're just basically zipped into the garment. This garment or one exactly like it is now in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. They acquired it for their uh, clothing and fashion collection. So here are some more of the more purely sculptural works here, and just a couple more views. I don't want to belabor it, but this one is called Handle with Care, and it's made out of luggage handles. That's what it's made of, and it's again pure chainmail. It's just a very simple chain, but it's in the shape of a heart. And then this one is Fragile, and this is eggshells and plastic rings and glue, and it is fragile because it's made out of eggshells, and so that's part of what gives us. These are from 2005, so it kind of gives you a sense of where she's been moving in her career from the late 90s to the early 2000s. And then this piece is the piece in the Cat Chow exhibition, not the piece that's in the surprise. This is called Log. It was from 2006. So this was the first time that Cat Chow made this log form. And she's held it together at the closure with two chopsticks that once belonged to her grandmother. So she's, putting her own self and her own family into it. You can see that at the very beginning, the very core of it, it's very, very knitted. But then she became a little bit more adventurous with some of the materials that she included in there. So that by the time that she's at the end, she's using, electronics and rope and other sorts of things, and it's being, fastened into place with these chopsticks. And so it occurred to her while she was in Cedar Rapids, why don't I make a log that reflects my time in Cedar Rapids, my show in Cedar Rapids, and my encounters with the people in Cedar Rapids. So that's where Cedar Rapids log came from, was really kind of an offshoot of this log from 2006. I thought I'd share with you a few of the installation shots because we happen to have them, and I thought you would enjoy it. This is actually fastening consumed to the wall. And then she listed everyone. Here's a much younger me, along with a few other people who are folding up these napkins, which which she kind of remade a piece called Serving Time, which she had originally done in 2003, but then she refabricated it for our exhibition in 2006. These are folded Japanese rice paper napkins that she then attached to a metal armature that created the dress. So here we are folding up countless napkins, and here they are being inserted into basically a chicken wire, if you will, some sort of form of chicken wire mesh that created the kind of skirt here, which was sort of an easy way to create this form in this case. And here it is in the center of the gallery when she was finished with it. And it was a recreation of a piece that she did in 2003 called Serving Time. And this is a woman wearing probably something with a little less rigid armature, full of napkins, and she's at this reception and she's handing out napkins basically as part of the performance piece. Kat Chow was also very generous to go out. Here she is at Lindell Mall, interacting with people, telling them about, the log that she's going to be creating. She's wearing a red version of her zipper dress, right there. And so she kind of interacted with the public right out in Lindell Mall. And she also held a workshop for us at the museum. And, true to tone, we were trying to figure out what kind of materials. And she said, let's work with playing cards, let's create things with playing cards and brass, basically brass fasteners. And so we went out and bought tons of playing cards and tons of brass fasteners, and that sort of a very atypical, untraditional materials, and and held this workshop, and and anyone could participate in this, and she encouraged them to create something by and large wearable from these, using both the face and the back of the playing card, and really being held together with fasteners, and piercing the playing cards with a hole punch. A simple handheld hole punch, and then the fastener. So, and I thought, since we, when in preparing for this presentation, I ran across these images and said, oh, well, let me share these images too, because it's really kind of cool to see how each of these people in this workshop were approaching the material in a very, very different way. And it was a pretty well-attended workshop. And people were going in wildly different directions, because we had plenty of playing cards, so that was easy. Sometimes they kept them down, sometimes they kept them whole. And then catch also help get them to sort of make it work, the functionality of the pieces. And then, of course, they did their own little fashion show, wearing their new creations. Or she wore, you know. She always liked to try things on. So, here someone's sliced the cards into small strips of matching numbers or face values, and then created this wonderful kind of necklace or bodice, or a hat, some sort of hairpiece, or another one. A lot of people did things that kind of would circle the neck, come down across the bodice, or these wonderful little wrist decorations. It's kind of she's adopting that kind of Power Ranger stance here. Or here how it fastens in the back with the heart. And then the creators wore their little garments in this sort of group show. So anyhow, so you see a very talented artist of a wide, variety of interests, and really sort of exploring things that are important to her, but also things that are important to other people as well. And out of that really has emanated this really, really terrific work, the Cedar Rapids log, that was purchased by some local Cedar Rapidians, and donated then to our collection. So we're thrilled that we were able to add that to our collection as a lasting marker of the exhibition and of the time that she spent in our community, and her interactions with members of our community. So I think this is my last slide. So I will stop sharing, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. I hope I provided enough context for this rather unusual piece in our collection. There's this huge backstory that exists behind it, that really reflects on the artist, on the museum, and on our entire community. I do invite you to come down to see Surprise. There's wonderful works in the exhibition. There's 59 pieces in the exhibition, I believe, and this is just one of them. And now you know a little bit more about that one piece, the history of it, how it came to be, where it fits into the artist's career. She's still making work. I still hear from her from time to time. She's still very, very active, and she's become more and more sculptural. So she's moving more and more into that dimension. But you can see that progression in her career, and you can see exactly where the Cedar Rapids log fits in. Well, I invite you to come down to see the show. I invite you to join us next month when we do another one night stand. And our new curator, Julia Jessen, will be leading that up for us. And that's you can find that information on the calendar on our website. And otherwise, I wish you a good evening, and we hope to see you soon, either via Zoom or down at the museum. Thank you.